I arrived at the party armed with a 4-pack of Doom Bar Amber Ale, another 4-pack of Stella, and a bottle of Shiraz. That should cover all the bases. Although I hadn't received an invitation, my closest friend, Brian, was set to attend with his partner, Claire, and he'd requested my presence. Well, to be precise, he rang me up and asked if I could swing by the party to keep Claire company. He had encountered a work-related issue and would be running late. Brian wasn't comfortable leaving Claire alone amidst the throng of office flirts. Currently unattached, I found myself amidst a birthday celebration for a colleague of Claire's from the local solicitor's office, where she worked as a secretary. Given the nature of the event, it was anticipated that a few unattached individuals would be in attendance. Plus, hitting a party with some drinks in tow seemed a more economical choice than heading to the pub on a Saturday night. Upon arrival, I deposited my beverages in the kitchen, which was teeming with men and beer, before setting out to locate Claire. Spotting her engaged in conversation with a man in the living room, I observed him shrug and depart. Approaching Claire, she greeted me with a smile and informed me of Brian's delay due to a breakdown with a delivery van or some such mishap. Expressing my awareness of the situation, as Brian had briefed me, Claire gratefully requested a drink, expressing reluctance to brave the kitchen, likening it to entering a lion's den. Brian, employed as a transport manager for a local delivery firm, had phoned me earlier, explaining his tardiness owing to a van breakdown or the need to transfer cargo to another vehicle. He implored me to keep Claire company until his arrival, expressing concern about her being alone. Despite my belief that Claire would easily find someone to converse with at a party attended by acquaintances from her workplace, Brian's request was honored out of loyalty and friendship. My bond with Brian stretched back to our early days in primary school, spanning nearly 22 years of mutual support. He had been there for me during my first heartbreak when I caught my then-girlfriend Sharon kissing Charlie, rationalizing that we weren't exclusive, and besides, it was Charlie's 7th birthday party. In turn, I had supported Brian when he failed to make the football team at 13, receiving encouragement from the sportsmaster to try again once he grew taller, fitter, and faster. Commiserating with him, we took up running together, a pursuit that eventually led him to secure a spot on the football squad and sparked my own interest in rugby. Together, we navigated numerous misadventures over the years, often involving broken windows and tardiness due to our antics. Our ill-fated experiment with smoking behind the sports pavilion, resulting in detention and a research assignment on lung cancer, swiftly deterred us from ever lighting up again. The bullies eventually decided it wasn't worth confronting both of us and gradually left us alone. As college rolled around, Brian pursued business studies while I delved into accounting. Despite our academic pursuits, we kept up with our sports. I teasingly dubbed him Ponzi for his penchant for soccer theatrics, while he affectionately labeled me a poofy Neanderthal for my rugby endeavors. Admittedly, many of my rugby teammates did possess a rather primitive appearance. With our active lifestyles, Brian and I became quite physically fit. Brian landed a position as an assistant transport manager, essentially juggling office duties and occasional driving tasks. Meanwhile, I secured a role as an assistant accountant at a local engineering firm, handling mundane tasks and number crunching. Cars, beer, and girls became staples of our leisure time, adding to the endless enjoyment for two young, energetic men. As the years passed, Brian's knack for organization and business expansion caught the eye of his company, leading to a promotion to deputy transport manager. Similarly, my aptitude for detecting numerical discrepancies propelled me to the role of deputy chief accountant. Our playful banter continued, with me teasing him as a Nazi van balancer and him dubbing me a Neanderthal bean shuffler, both acknowledging the truth in each other's jests. Then came Claire. It was an inevitable development, something we had always anticipated. We knew that one day we would each meet our soulmates and that our lives would change. I secretly hoped to be the first to find my lifelong partner. Claire's presence had a positive effect on Brian, tempering his recklessness and grounding him. Not to mention, she was undeniably attractive, with her long black hair, captivating smile, and well-proportioned figure. They had been together for over 2 years, and Claire had moved in with Brian 6 months prior, though rumors suggested she still owned her flat, renting it out instead. Rarely having the opportunity for one-on-one conversation with Claire, I finally broached the question that had been on my mind. So, when's the big day? Subtlety not being my strong suit. She appeared a bit bashful. Brian drops hints, but I keep telling him I'm not ready yet. With a hint of secrecy, she confided, "Don't get me wrong, I love him deeply. He's kind, considerate, cute, funny, and just genuinely nice." I sensed there was an underlying issue, something she wasn't articulating. "So, why haven't you set a date yet?" "I've known him for over 20 years. He's a fantastic guy, a great friend, and I'm eager to be his best man so I can flirt with your bridesmaids a bit." I attempted to inject some humor into the conversation, but her demeanor remained serious. We were tucked away in a quiet corner, and she turned to face me, placing her hand on my arm. "Dave," she said, locking eyes with me, which felt a tad unsettling. "I've known you for a while now, so I trust you can keep a secret. Despite Brian being wonderful, there's something lacking." I was perplexed. Having observed the pair together for years, they seemed perfectly matched, almost telepathic in their understanding of each other. Meanwhile, I couldn't decipher a woman's thoughts even after she explicitly stated them. "It's just that, well, he's—" "Oh God, this is embarrassing," she struggled. "Don't you have girlfriends to confide in about this sort of thing?" I inquired. "Absolutely not. I can already imagine their reactions." "But you're his best friend at least," she replied. Placing my hand atop hers, I assured her, "You can trust me, you're like family. I'll do anything to help." "I don't know if you can." "It's just that, oh God, he's not very good," she whispered. I was further baffled. "What do you mean?" She rolled her eyes heavenward. You mean? I discreetly gestured upstairs toward the bedrooms and whispered, "You mean in the bedroom?" She nodded in confirmation. Straightening up slightly, she seemed relieved to have unburdened herself. "Can you think of anything?" "How would I know?" "Have you tried discussing it with him?" I suggested. "I've tried, but he keeps shutting me down." "I'm sorry, but I need more," she confessed. "David, I know you can keep a secret. Is there anything you can do to assist me?" she implored, her hand still resting on my arm. I recoiled as if stung, taking a step back. "Hold on a second, I'm his friend," I protested. She looked puzzled for a moment before smiling. No, you silly boy. Not like that. I like you a lot, quite a lot. What I mean is, can you talk to him, educate him? The rumors suggest you're not half bad." Relieved, I clarified, "I don't know. I've never been asked this before. It's uncomfortable, but what's the actual problem?" We had spent enough time together in the locker rooms after matches to deduce that it probably wasn't a matter of size. He was about the same size as me when flaccid. I assumed he'd be similar when erect, though the thought was rather repulsive. It's like he knows he won't last long, so he rushes it. He gets me there most times, but then it's over quickly, and it's not very satisfying. Tears welled up in her eyes. I love him, but I need more from our intimacy, if you catch my drift. This is surreal. I need another beer, and you probably need a refill on your wine. Be right back. I needed a moment to process. I shot Brian a quick text to check on his ETA. He replied, saying he was heading home to change because he was dirty, about 20 minutes away, maybe less. That left us with a brief window for conversation, allowing Claire a few minutes to compose herself. Returning with her drink, she downed half of it in one go. She informed me of Brian's ETA, roughly 15 minutes. All right, we've got 10 minutes. So, to put it bluntly, he satisfies you, right? Yeah, but only about half the time. And it's all over within 5 to 10 minutes, no slow, leisurely sessions? That's about the gist of it. I sensed she wanted to say more, but I signaled to halt. My mind was already overloaded with information. Foreplay? Oral? She looked visibly embarrassed now, though not as much as I felt. I perform oral, and he's skilled with his fingers. But he's not keen on reciprocating orally, if you catch my drift. When he uses his fingers is when I climax, but it still feels like something's missing. She didn't elaborate further, but I knew Brian wasn't her first, just as Claire wasn't his. She lightly touched my arm. If you could just get him to open up about it, that would be a start. All right, I'll grab him a beer for when he arrives. You freshen up, and I'll ponder on it. I understood why she couldn't confide in her girlfriends. Their advice might simply be to end things and move on, but she truly loved him. Thanks, she said, looking up at me, placing a hand on my shoulder and planting a kiss on my cheek. You're like the big sister I never had. I chuckled, gesturing to my taller frame. Big sister? Okay, the big brother I never had. I might just start calling you Big Bro with that. She headed to the restroom to fix her makeup, while I fetched some beers, including 2 for Brian, who arrived shortly before Claire returned. He had grabbed a couple of beers on his way through the kitchen, so our greetings involved the awkward juggle of multiple drinks. Claire reappeared, and Brian greeted her with a warm hug and a lingering kiss. He apologized for being late and thanked me for looking after Claire. He invited me for a beer on Monday after rugby training as a token of appreciation for my impromptu caretaking. I assured him it was no trouble, expressing my fondness for Claire. But with him footing the bill for the beers, I was definitely in. He informed us he would have been delayed, but halfway through transferring the load from one van to another, the mechanic managed to get the original van started. Rather than moving everything back, he split the delivery notices in half and sent the 2 drivers off, hoping they could make up time and possibly finish early. Now that he was here, it was my cue to mingle and try my luck with some of the available ladies. I engaged in conversations, danced with a few, and even shared some slow, intimate dances. I exchanged phone numbers with a few, promising to call them later, although my heart wasn't fully invested. Around 11:30, Brian and Claire sought me out to announce their departure. Brian, wearing his signature goofy grin, winked at me knowingly. Oh dear. They offered to share a taxi as they lived not far from me, but I declined, opting to let the lovebirds have their privacy. Well, at least one of them. I stayed until the party began to wind down before making my way home, still feeling somewhat perplexed. Meeting Brian at the pub around 7:30 on Monday, he steered me to a table instead of our usual spot at the bar. Without preamble, he dropped a bombshell. I think Claire's seeing someone else. Damn, why do you think that? I asked, taken aback. Well, she's craving more sex and wants to explore other activities. I thought we were fine. We're intimate 2 or 3 times a week at least, but it's not enough for her. Sorry, mate, can't see the issue with that, I remarked. It's like she feels guilty about it. I don't know, I can't quite put my finger on it. What other activities does she want to try? Licking, you know, down there. That's fantastic. What's the problem with that? Go for it, mate. No, it's awful. It smells terrible and tastes nasty. I couldn't fathom it. Claire was usually quite hygienic and always smelled pleasant. No, it's fantastic, almost as good as a cold pint of bitter on a scorching summer day, albeit warmer, I countered. No, it's all fishy and unpleasant. Doesn't she shower? Of course she does, don't be absurd. So why does she smell down there after a shower? If I do it, she tastes like soap, and then I can't shake the mental image of blowing soap bubbles up her. Oh, damn, sorry, I'll stop. But you get what I mean. And I hate the taste of soap. I could relate. We both had our mouths washed out with soapy water after swearing in our first year of school. It was dreadful. He paused. I've only, done it a couple of times with Claire, but it reminds me of Sharon White. You mean Sharon Pond White? That would certainly put anyone off. Sharon always had a foul odor about her. I never ventured down there with her. In fact, I never touched her in that way at all. But I could imagine it wouldn't be pleasant, given her general odor. No, sorry mate, you've got it wrong. The taste of a woman down there is fantastic. If you don't mind me asking, how are you doing it? Damn, why are they confiding in me instead of talking to each other? He admitted he preferred using his fingers without much exploration, and when he ventured down there, the taste was reminiscent of soap, almost as unpleasant as Sharon White. I reassured him that, in my limited expertise, as long as the lady thoroughly rinsed, it shouldn't taste of soap. I recounted the tale of Katie, the married woman who used me as her plaything. Not that I minded being used in such a manner, my grievance stemmed from her lying about being divorced when she wasn't. Her husband, a Navy man often deployed, was the reason she frequented my place. I only discovered the truth when she forgot to remove her wedding ring one day. She insisted on showering immediately upon arrival, which delayed our activities by a couple of hours. However, this ensured she remained fresh down there, enhancing the overall experience. The better the preparation, the better the outcome. Now red-faced with embarrassment, I divulged Claire's tips to him. "Listen, mate, this is awkward for me, but here it goes. When Claire showers, give it a couple of hours before getting down to business. Let your fingers do the exploring, and I mean a lot of exploring." I buried my face in my hands, incredulous at my own audacity, but I soldiered on in a hushed tone. "Look, mate, this is almost as awkward as hearing your parents having sex, but bear with me. When she reaches a certain level of moisture, that's when she tastes best, at least in my experience. But this is what works for me, you'll have to figure out what works for you too. I let my fingers do the work and my tongue do the talking until she's had at least one, if not two or three, of those things." He glanced at me and whispered, "Orgasms." I nodded, continuing. "Exactly. When she's had a few of those, I go in hard. If she hasn't come down too much, it's relatively easy to bring her to another one. Now, if I want to prolong the experience, I have a few techniques to slow myself down. I clench my buttocks together or dig my fingernails into my skin. A bit of pain usually does the trick. If I'm really struggling, I conjure up mental images of Margaret Thatcher or the Queen. That tends to put the brakes on things." He nearly spilled his beer. "Mate, that would put me off entirely, not just slow me down." I could see him pondering for a moment. "But you fancy Margaret Thatcher and the Queen?" "Yes, but not as bed partners, you idiot. That usually gives me enough time to bring her to another one. That's my method, mate. How you handle it is up to you. But for heaven's sake, you need to talk about it. Communication is crucial in a relationship, especially if marriage is on the horizon." I excused myself to the bar. Although he insisted on paying, I needed a break to gather my thoughts. While at the bar, I devised a plan. Upon returning, I proposed to Brian that since he'd be away for a couple of weeks and back on weekends, it was an opportune time for some research. Not the late-night adult content at the hotel, definitely no porn, lest he stumble upon something extreme like latex lesbian bondage. While intriguing, it wouldn't necessarily be helpful. Instead, I suggested he utilize his laptop to search for topics like how to enhance your sex life or how to pleasure your partner in bed. Then, I had another idea. With my surplus flexi-time hours, I could discreetly keep an eye on Claire during her lunch breaks. She frequented a nearby hotel where she was a gym member. I could ensure there was no mischief going on there and also monitor their apartment. I felt confident she wasn't up to anything, and it seemed to reassure Brian. Both of us left content, and not just because of the beer. He had a plan to spice up their sex life, possibly leading to marriage. And I had provided him with peace of mind. I had given hope to two of my closest friends. True to my word, I visited the hotel during lunchtime on Tuesday and Wednesday, observing Claire heading to the swimming pool and gym, respectively. Thursday brought a deviation from the routine, which raised concerns. She bypassed her usual destinations and headed straight for the lift, ascending to the 4th floor. There was no way for me to follow and see where she went. Over an hour later, she emerged from the lift alongside a young man. They didn't seem to be together, exchanging no words and deliberately ignoring each other. The young man proceeded to the reception desk while Claire exited the hotel. It struck me as slightly odd, and an inexplicable shiver ran down my spine. We all gathered in the pub on Saturday night, where Claire teased me lightly for not calling any of the girls from her office. Apparently, my thoughtful demeanor in trying to assist my friends had painted me as a mysterious, brooding figure, sparking curiosity among some of her colleagues. Absolute nonsense. I was simply focused on helping out my mates. Nevertheless, we decided to make the most of it. Claire suggested Shirley might be up for some fun, so I arranged to meet her on Sunday night since I already had her number. As Brian went to fetch more drinks at the bar, Claire leaned in and whispered, "I don't know what advice you gave him last week, but last night was definitely an improvement. We still have a ways to go, but he's even open to discussing it. Although I swear I heard him mention Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth II at one point. On Sunday morning, I watched Brian play football as Claire stood by my side as usual. Not too close, we're not a couple, but her company is pleasant. Without prying too much, I casually inquired if things had improved with their communication. She gave me a sidelong smile and replied, "He's opening up, thank you." After the match, Brian caught up with me at the bar while Claire was momentarily absent. "Hey mate, thanks for the advice. Googling how to improve your sex life led me to a slew of women's magazines, not what I expected. Bloody hell, women are peculiar. Seems like they want to talk. Anyway, I've got nothing to lose. If I want to marry her, I've got to give it a shot. Thanks, mate. Maybe you should follow your own advice." I responded in our usual banter, "Bugger off, you idiot." Feeling guilty, I visited the hotel at lunchtime on Tuesday. Claire headed straight to the swimming pool, and on Wednesday, she went directly to the gym. However, Thursday still troubled me, so I arrived early. I spotted the young man from last week heading to reception. A sense of unease gripped me. I followed him into the lift, and we ascended to the third floor. Upon exiting, I pretended to be confused, a role that came naturally to me. I observed which room he entered and found a secluded spot, hoping against hope for nothing untoward to occur. My hopes were shattered when Claire emerged from the lift about 10 minutes later and entered the same room. Panic surged through me. What on earth was I going to do? This could ruin the lives of people I cared about, if it hadn't already. I waited downstairs in the lobby, deciding to give her one chance and see what she had to say. When they emerged from the lift together again, I positioned myself in front of them before they could part ways. Claire's expression fell. "Oh, damn." The man stepped toward me, but Claire touched his arm and shook her head. Addressing him, she said, "Richard, goodbye. I won't be seeing you again. Do not contact me." He walked away, looking bewildered. Claire reached out to me, tears welling in her eyes. She pulled me toward a quiet corner of the lounge, and I followed. Her opening words hit me like a ton of bricks. "Dave, this is exactly what it seems like. And I'm going to throw myself on your mercy. I will answer any of your questions, absolutely truthfully and honestly. And at the end, if you feel the need to tell Brian what you have seen and what I'm about to tell you, it will still be absolutely and unequivocally my fault. No blame will fall on you." With that, she picked up her phone and informed her office she wouldn't be in this afternoon. She had something far more important than work to sort out. I was completely caught off guard, unsure where to even begin. Claire could see my confusion and signaled for a waiter, ordering a Guinness and a white wine with a demeanor that was both professional and businesslike. It was a side of her I'd never witnessed before. After all, we don't typically mingle in the same work circles. Tears still glistened in her eyes as she said, "Do you have the rest of the afternoon? This may take that long." I simply nodded. As we waited for our drinks to arrive, I could sense the weight of the impending conversation hanging heavily in the air. Pouring a Guinness can be a slow process, and Claire sat patiently, though tears continued to trickle down her cheeks, which she wiped away occasionally with her handkerchief. Taking a gulp of my Guinness, I nearly downed half the pint in one go. Claire motioned for another round. Looking at me with sad eyes, she said, "You've probably pieced some of this together since our chat at the party. Do you want me to tell the story, or do you prefer to ask questions?" I mustered a false sense of confidence and replied, "You tell the story, and I'll ask questions as we go along." She wiped away her tears once more. As I mentioned at the party, I need more than Brian can give me, and he wouldn't discuss it. I couldn't see a way around it. Richard just fills that need. I'm sorry, that may be difficult for you to hear, but many men can fulfill this role. I can detach sex from making love. Sometimes I crave tenderness, intimacy, waking up in the arms of a man who loves me. And sometimes I just need raw passion. Brian can't fulfill the latter yet. He came close on Saturday. Richard satisfies that part of me. I couldn't see a way forward to stay with Brian and get the sexual satisfaction I need. And before you ask, I don't work with him. We met at a gathering for solicitors across town. He's married and has no intention of leaving his wife. I'm just his affair. We meet once or twice a month when I have the urge. It's rare to meet 2 weeks in a row, but he ticks the box for satisfying my physical desires. So when Brian returns on Friday, I can indulge in the emotional intimacy of being with a man who loves me. It may not make sense to you, but it does to me. Any questions yet? Despite the heavy subject matter, she maintained a businesslike demeanor, as if she had erected a shield around herself. I have several questions, but I'm deliberating on how much I truly want to know, which ones are crucial, and which answers matter. So, some might not be relevant because I'm unsure about what is. Like, where you met him isn't important, but who made the first move? That one's straightforward. He overheard me saying I could do with a good shag, and he replied, I could do that for a pretty lady as long as my wife doesn't find out. I thought he was joking. Later, he caught me coming out of the ladies' restroom, took my hand, and led me into one of the partners' offices. I won't delve into the details, but I got what I asked for. Are you remorseful? That's the tough one. Am I sorry you caught me? I don't know. Part of me feels relieved it's out in the open. Part of me is grateful you've given me a reason to stop, even if Brian leaves me. Part of me is sad that I won't have good sex anymore. I'll miss it. Am I sorry I cheated on Brian? Absolutely. I don't want to blame Brian because it's my fault entirely. I should have been stronger. Would I have continued? I don't know, but probably not, now that Brian is improving. We've started to communicate, and he took some of my suggestions on Sunday evening, so I can envision a time when Richard won't be necessary. Anyway, you forced my hand, there's no more Richard, and I'm not sorry about that. She had addressed several of my inquiries all at once, even those I hadn't realized I wanted answers to or intended to ask. I didn't need to know how many times, once was sufficient. I wasn't Brian, and this was going to devastate him. While she meant a lot to me, I didn't love her like Brian did. Do you love Brian? Her response caught me off guard. You've seen us together, what do you think? I know you witnessing me with Richard casts doubt on that, but to answer your question, yes, absolutely. I was planning to summon the courage, and the next time he proposed, I intended to say yes. You're probably going to view me as conniving, a cheating woman, and honestly, you're right. You'll also want to know if I'd do it again. I've pondered that extensively, and if Richard hadn't initiated it, then no, I never sought out to have an affair. You'll ask me if he's better than Brian. Yes, in terms of pure sex, he is, otherwise, I wouldn't be with him. This isn't an excuse, but if Brian and I could just communicate, and he would listen to me, he could be so much better. Heck, he improved just from chatting with you for one night. We're not there yet, and I still wonder how Margaret Thatcher fits into this. Glancing at her, I remarked, you seem to have this all planned out. You've answered all my questions as if you knew you were going to get caught. In fact, you've addressed some I wasn't even going to ask. No, I never anticipated getting caught. Those are just the excuses I've been using to rationalize this to myself. But to be frank with you, once I'm away from Richard, I forget about him until the next time I get the itch. By the way, how did you catch us? When we stepped out of the lift, we could have been anybody, but the expression on your face almost crushed me, and I couldn't bring myself to lie to you. I explained to her that Brian had grown suspicious due to the increased requests for sex, almost as if it were guilt-driven. She seemed horrified by that notion. To reassure Brian, I offered to tail her because I was confident nothing was happening, and I had receipts from the hotel to prove I was there, intending to make him pay for my coffee and beer. I recounted seeing her last Thursday, and although nothing inappropriate occurred, seeing her with that man made my instincts flare up. So, I arrived early this week, observed Richard checking in, and followed him to a room where I saw her enter shortly after. Damn, she muttered, it wasn't guilt-driven sex, I was just trying to help him improve. I was attempting to mold him into the lover I know he can be. He excels at everything else, he just needs a little assistance with this. Oh, damn. I had a lot to ponder. I have a couple of questions. Why haven't you asked me not to tell Brian? That caught her off guard. I wouldn't do that to you, it would be unfair to both of you. I wouldn't want to force you to choose between me and him. I know about some of the things you two have done in the past and how you've supported each other. I couldn't ask you to prioritize me over him. I know you care about me, but not that much. I'm sorry, I value you as a friend, so I couldn't put you in that position either. Before you inform Brian, may I ask you a favor? One last request, because he will undoubtedly leave me, cast me aside. And I don't expect you'll remain my friend much longer. She reached across the table to grasp my hand, but I recoiled as if I'd been stung, refusing to let her touch me. I suppose I deserved that, she said, tears welling in her eyes. Please let me break the news to him. I will be truthful with him, even admitting that you caught us, and I've requested to be the one to deliver the devastating news. I couldn't bear for his best friend to inform him when I'm the one shattering his heart. I stared at her and rose from my seat. I want to yell and curse at you and hurl every insult imaginable your way. I need time to consider this. If I make a mistake, I'll jeopardize a slew of friendships, mine and Brian's, yours and Brian's, ours, and many more. I paused. Until an hour ago, I cherished our friendship. With that, I walked away, even leaving behind nearly a pint of Guinness on the table. This is more crucial than good beer or even Guinness. Damn, what a mess. How do I even begin to handle this? Priority number 1, protect Brian. But from what exactly? His own shortcomings? Her infidelity? His inevitable heartbreak? Damn it all. I didn't get much sleep that night, and I made a conscious effort not to drown my thoughts in beer. Solutions wouldn't materialize through a haze of alcohol. By morning, however, I had a plan. I knew Brian wouldn't be home until around 5 in the evening, but these courses could sometimes wrap up early, especially on a Friday. He might show up closer to 1 o'clock, and I didn't want to find myself in a deep discussion with his girlfriend. I sent Claire a text, head to Waitrose at 10 o'clock. We'll bump into each other, have coffee, and I'll lay out some options for you. Delete this message now. I arrived at the supermarket, grabbed a basket, and wandered around aimlessly, tossing random items into it. Wet wipes. What the hell were those doing in my basket? And the bottle of gin, I knew exactly why that was there. We coincidentally met just outside the coffee shop. Inside, I passed her a coffee and finally got a good look at her face. I'd seen my own reflection in the mirror. I looked rough, but she looked even worse, and I imagined she felt just as terrible. Summoning some courage, I began, looking her straight in the eye, my voice sounding unfamiliar even to me. Part of me damn well hates you, but part of me loves you like a sister. I didn't sleep a wink last night. As a man, I can understand where you're coming from with this whole separating sex and love thing. I've been there. So as much as I want to despise you for it, I can't. I can't be that much of a hypocrite. Here's what I've decided. If anyone's going to tell him, it can be you, just as you said. But I have another idea. I saw confusion flicker in her eyes. She seemed convinced this was going to end only one way. We don't tell him a damn thing about what you've done. I chose my moment carefully, ensuring she wasn't holding a cup or sipping her coffee. I've never seen anyone look so surprised. When I sat back down with my coffee, I think she saw the Grim Reaper perched on my shoulder. What? How? When? What? She stammered. This is my proposal. We keep it from him. There are a couple of things you've mentioned. He's improving. He's starting to open up and listen. While he's been away, he's been Googling stuff on the internet and ended up in a heap of women's magazines. He says women are weird, and he's probably not wrong. But that's why he was more receptive to you this week. You've been telling me things you should be telling him, and vice versa. You two need to communicate together. I know you've tried, and he's pushed you away, but from what I've gathered from both of you, progress started last weekend. So, if you swear to me on your mother's grave, although I know she's not dead yet, that you'll never, ever cheat on him and that you'll love him until one of you leaves this earth, I won't breathe a word of this to him. I'll leave it up to you. I'll still be here to listen and help because I love you both. The expression on her face was like the Grim Reaper falling off my shoulder. You do this for us? For Brian and me? Yes, I do it for my two closest friends, for all our parents, and if I'm honest, for myself too. But if you ever let him down again, I'll spill all the dirty details." Tears were flowing freely now, and she was running out of napkins. I even offered her my handkerchief. I had a clean one and a spare. She'd been crying a lot lately. "Yes, anything, absolutely anything." "All right, now for some hard truths, and hopefully it'll help." I proceeded to tell her about Sharon Pongy White, hinting about rinsing down there and the soapy taste that made him think of blowing bubbles. I didn't elaborate on that. I swallowed my embarrassment and recounted how I treated Katie, the same story I told Brian. I was trying to lend her a hand to help him. She sat there with a mix of amazement and disbelief on her face, unsure which aspect surprised her more, what I'd done or that I'd shared it with her. I stood up, feeling the need to escape, and said to her, "Over to you now. I'm utterly exhausted. You and Brian have drained me. I've got rugby tomorrow afternoon. Maybe I'll see you there, maybe not. If you're not both there, well, I'll see you around." And with that, I left. I paid for the gin but left the wipes. Job done. Time for me to get on with my life. At least Brian would still be there, of that I was certain. We warmed up, exchanged banter, and dashed out onto the field from the pavilion. Waiting at the bottom of the steps were Brian and Claire. She had the widest grin, and he was beaming, giving me a thumbs up. I don't recall much of the game. People said I played like the wind, and we won. I didn't see them that weekend or the next. They went away for a few days. The following Wednesday, Claire called, asking if I'd be at the club on Friday night. It sounded more like a command, so I assured her I would be. There was a bit of music playing, not too loud, just background noise. The three of us sat in an alcove. Claire had a serious expression, and I noticed she hadn't been drinking much. She was seated between us, then suddenly, in a lull in the music, she turned to Brian. I felt a hand reach across to touch my thigh, which was odd, but then she found my hand and squeezed it. While locking eyes with Brian, she said, "Are you going to ask me?" "Ask you what?" "You know, the question you've been dodging for the past 6 months." "Oh, damn, does that mean you're ready?" Dolt, I thought to myself, perhaps it was the beer. "Well, you won't know until you ask, will you?" To everyone's surprise, he did it properly. He shuffled to the edge of the bench, got down on one knee, and said, "Claire Wolstenholme, will you do me the great honor of being my wife?" The whole place fell silent as everyone noticed Brian on his knees. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," she replied, her voice filled with excitement. She gave my hand a slight squeeze, then let go and slid right across to him, embracing him tightly. They were married 6 months later. And yes, I did end up with one of the bridesmaids. Not the maid of honor, she was already married. It was Harriet, actually. Harriet and I dated for the next 18 months. Things got quite serious with Harriet, and she even moved in with me for a while. 18 months after their wedding, young Daniel arrived, and I became his godfather. That was when Harriet left me. After the christening party had ended and only a few close friends remained, I got down on one knee and proposed to Harriet. She didn't hesitate. She stood up, said no, and walked out. It left everyone stunned, and my two best friends hugged me as I wept. When I returned home, Harriet had already moved out. We met for coffee a couple of weeks later, and she explained that she couldn't share me, couldn't share the love. I had no idea what she meant. 14 months later, Daniel was joined by Kirsty, and once again, I became a godfather. I attended that christening alone. Life carried on. Over the years, I had several girlfriends, none lasting more than a couple of years. I resigned myself to the idea of living out my days as a bachelor. I was rarely lonely. My two best friends made sure of that. Daniel joined the army, and I attended his passing out parade at Sandhurst, as well as Kirsty's graduation from university. The two kids had their ups and downs, but turned out to be good people. I was getting older. At 53, I was too old for rugby, and my bones didn't heal as quickly as they used to. I wasn't as fast as I once was. Then, I received a phone call from Brian, asking me to meet them both at the pub across town on Monday. We hadn't been to that pub on a Monday since the day he confided in me about suspecting Claire of cheating on him. It worried me a bit, especially when we got there and saw Brian sitting in the same alcove where we had our conversation all those years ago. He looked rough, very rough. I'd seen him the previous week, and he didn't look nearly as bad then. There was a palpable sadness about him. I started, "You don't look too good, mate. Is everything all right?" "Actually, no. It's pretty terrible, to be honest. Remember when we set fire to the dustbin having our first and last cigarette and then had to research lung cancer? Well, this isn't lung cancer, but it is cancer. Leukemia." I reached out and grabbed his hand, feeling like my world was collapsing. I opened my mouth to say something, but he held his hand up, signaling for me to stop. "Sorry, mate. It's bad. I've only just found out, and it's beyond treatable. I've got it most a month. I swore to myself I'd never set foot in this damn pub again." That's when I noticed Claire standing on the other side of me. She slid in beside me, and the three of us cried our eyes out. "Is there anything they can do?" I asked. Claire answered, her voice heavy with sorrow. "No, it's too late. We didn't even know he had it. He just felt tired, so we brushed it off as exhaustion from work and early bedtimes. It wasn't until he woke up last week looking like this that I insisted he see a doctor. He'd been refusing, claiming it was just stress and fatigue. I won't go into detail about the next 3 weeks. They were pretty miserable. A week before Brian passed, I was at the hospital seeing him. He gave me an envelope and told me to open it when he was gone. He made me promise not to open it until then. And I promised. The funeral was busy, held at the club. Daniel was married now with children, as was Kirsty. We tried to make it a joyous occasion, a celebration of life, but it was tough. As we walked in, Claire asked me if I had the envelope. I did. It was in my inside jacket pocket. I tapped it lightly, and she smiled at me. I forgot all about it until I got home. Then, I wasn't in the mood, so I left it in my jacket. I didn't know how my relationship with Claire would continue. We met for coffee during the week. She seemed to be holding up better than me. About a month after the funeral, I got a call from her. Could I go round to their house and give Daniel a hand? They wanted to rearrange some beds. I showed up as requested on Saturday afternoon. Daniel wanted help removing his old bed from his room since he was taking it to his house. Then, we were to take the double bed out of Brian and Claire's room and put it in his old room. Claire was getting a new bed. I couldn't always understand Claire's logic, but if that's what she wanted, that's what she'd get. The new bed arrived just as we finished moving the others, so Daniel and I put it together. After the sweaty work, we sat in the kitchen, sipping cold old speckled hens. Daniel turned to me and said, "Uncle David," a title he hadn't used since before he joined the army. This was about to get strange. "You haven't read the letter yet, have you?" "No, knowing your dad, he's probably just going to thank me for everything I've done, but really, there's no need. And once I do, it'll feel like he's really gone. As long as I leave it unopened, it's like a part of him is still here." I paused, then added, "It's not that, is it? Do you know what's in there?" "I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling Mom wants you to open it," Daniel said. I promised him I would read it as soon as I got home. We had a few more beers, and then I headed home. Since I'd had a few drinks, Claire asked me to let her know when I arrived home, just in case I wandered off into the woods or something. I sent her a text. This was going to be tough. I poured myself a large gin and tonic, heavy on the gin and light on the tonic. Then, I opened the letter and began to read. It was handwritten, with some words crossed out. "Hey mate, you probably think this is just a thank you letter for being my best mate for over 50 years. And yeah, it'll make you tear up. It's a journey down memory lane. Remember Sally kissing Charlie, and us vomiting into the dustbin we'd set on fire with our first and last cigarette? We got the cane for that, but we never told our parents because we knew they'd thrash us too. And remember pooling our pocket money to pay for the greenhouse glass we broke with the cricket ball? We should have stuck to tennis balls. And that old banger of mine, leaking 20 miles to the gallon out of a fractured pipe, leaving us stranded overnight in Skegness. Bloody cold sleeping in the car, wasn't it? Then there were the girlfriends, a few before we met Claire. But once I met her, I knew she was the one. That month when I thought she was cheating on me was tough. She was different from the others. I cared about her deeply, but I was a bit too macho, thinking I knew everything about pleasing a woman. But I didn't, and as usual, you stepped in to help me out. Oh, and I found the phrase that really slowed me down. Try remembering or even saying this when you're on the brink of climax. The Right Honorable Margaret Thatcher, leader of the Conservative Party, Prime Minister to Her Royal Highness Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. What a mouthful, but it did the trick. I know the support you gave Claire in those weeks before she accepted my proposal. Your decision was the right one, though I didn't think so at the time. But after we talked about it, I realized how grateful I am. It must have been tough for you, but you made the right call. Rest easy now, old mate. Thanks to you, I've had a wonderful life, loving a remarkable woman who gave me 2 amazing children and lots of grandchildren. Without your clear thinking that day, none of it would have happened. Thanks, mate. Now, on to the kids. The time you spent talking to Daniel while he was at Sandhurst, struggling. The times you ran with him for miles, saying nothing. When he returned from Iraq, he told me how you hugged him, and he opened up to you about losing a member of his platoon. He wanted to show me he could handle it, to make me proud. But I'm glad you told him to come to me. Crying with your son after what he'd been through is humbling. You were there for Kirsty when she fell in with that rough crowd. She was doing things her mother and I would never have approved of. She told me how you yelled at her, making her feel small, telling her she was better than that. We never spoke about that trip we took to her university with the baseball bats. I remember staring into the flames of the bonfire we made with the clothes and bats, and you hugging me. And thank you for being there for me and for stopping that jerk from blindsiding me. This is the first time Claire has heard about that little adventure. I hope we were there for you, especially when Harriet broke your heart. We saw how much it hurt. But when she did that, and the way she did it, and what she told you, made us think, and we saw things differently. Claire and I also think it's why you're alone. Now, this is the tough part for you, not for me because, A, I'm not here anymore. B, Claire and I have realized it for some time. In fact, you're probably the only one who doesn't see it. You love Claire. Because you love me as a friend, you pushed it away, buried it. Harriet saw it, and so did many of the other girls. That's why they didn't stay. They loved you, but they couldn't share. It might surprise you, but she always liked you a lot. But after your decision not to tell me what happened while I was away, that like turned into love. It started as brotherly love, but after all you've done for us, it grew. It didn't bother me because I knew she loved me more than you, and anyway, I love you too. So now, I'd like to ask you a couple more favors. 1, look after my wife any way you can. She means the world to me, and I know you'll do a fantastic job. 2, don't marry her for a year and a day after my funeral. It's not for me, I'm not here, I'm only in your heart. But our parents might not take it well. Oh, I think Danny and Kirsty will be thrilled if you ask her. One more thing, she's a warm, wonderful woman, so please don't wait a year and a day to consummate your love. You have my full blessing. Okay, mate, that's it. I'm tired now, and by the way, Claire is sitting beside me as I write this. She's helping me when I struggle with the writing. So, over to you, mate. I'm going to ask you to keep looking after my family like you have for the past 30-odd years. Goodbye, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your best mate ever, Brian. The letter was soaked with my tears. I couldn't think. I finished the gin and tonic and nearly choked. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder and nearly jumped out of my skin. I spun around, and there was Claire, crying. I really should have locked that back door, but I suppose it didn't matter. She had a key to my house anyway. Was Brian and I right? Do you love me? She asked, her eyes searching mine. I don't know, I replied, uncertainty clouding my thoughts. Had I been concealing it all this time to shield Brian? I really don't know. Pushing her back gently, I held her at arm's length. She tilted her head, a soft smile lighting up her face. I think you're still trying to hide it, she said gently. Let me make this easier for you. Since that day in Waitrose, I've grown fonder and fonder of you, and that fondness has turned into love. Don't get me wrong, I love Brian a whole lot more, but who could not love a man for all the things you've done for us? I didn't mind being second best. Taking my hand, she led me to the stairs. I think it's time, she said simply. It was an odd party, held between Christmas and New Year, and almost everyone was there, my parents, Brian's parents, Claire's parents, Daniel and Kirsty with their families. Tension seemed to hang in the air, palpable to all. In a quiet corner, the three fathers cornered me. Brian's father, Jonathan, fixed me with a steady gaze. When are you going to ask her? Ask who what? I feigned ignorance. Claire to marry you, of course, Claire's dad interjected. Whoa, who said anything about that? I protested. Jonathan leaned in. It's plainly obvious to everyone except you. Daniel and Kirsty can't wait. You've been part of their family for so long, this would round it off. You're not replacing their dad, you're an added bonus. It's almost like they've got two dads. Finally, I relented. Jonathan, Brian wrote me a letter before he passed. He told me things I didn't know about myself. And yes, I will ask her. But he asked me to wait for a year and a day because he didn't want to upset you. He wasn't sure how you would take it. My dad chimed in. We watched you two grow up and saw the messes you got into. And if some of the rumors are true, there's some recent stuff too. Jonathan nodded. Look, son, you have our full blessing. Don't wait, don't waste any more time. We're not getting any younger. As they released me, I returned to the living room to find a hushed atmosphere. Everyone's eyes were on me. Brian's mother approached and placed something in my hand, an engagement ring. I'm only lending this to you until you can get a proper one, she said with a smile. That single gesture settled my mind. Making my way to Claire, I knelt before her and spoke the words. She held out her hand, and as I slipped the ring onto her finger, the room erupted in cheers. Not the most romantic of proposals, but it was perfect. Later, I whispered to her, this was a setup. How much of it did you know? All of it. Who do you think set it up? She replied with a grin. Love you. We were married 6 weeks later. I instructed Daniel and Kirsty never to call me dad, never to call me uncle. They never did call me dad, but occasionally, just to tease me, they'd call me uncle. And then, after all those years, it all came pouring out. Yes, I did love her. Strangely enough, I think it started from that day she was brutally honest with me in the hotel lobby. Her willingness to face things dispassionately, to take all the blame, and to protect me, Brian, and our friendship.